Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks. Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Continuing Education, Bachelor's Degree Program, Elective Course, Gender Studies, BGSE-001 Gender Sensitization, Society, Culture and Change,
Block 3 Gender and Work.
Unit 9, Gender and Employment. 9.1 Introduction. After reading about how gender influences work, both paid and unpaid work in Unit 8 of this block, we will read about how gender impacts employment in formal and informal sectors of economy. We now understand how a man's world is different from a woman's world, so are man's employments, occupations, and work opportunities different from that of a woman's. We will start this unit with understanding different concepts related to employments and how women are situated in the realm of work. The unit ends with a reflection on the present day scenario and the challenges ahead to bring about parity in work opportunities to both men and women. Let us now cast a look at the objectives of reading this unit. 9.2 Objectives. After reading this unit, you will be able to times define concepts related to employment. Times explain implications of gender division of labor and times describe the present employment scenario and challenges ahead. 9.3 Defining employment. Employment is commonly defined as a state of being in paid work by an individual. However, Cooley, an economist, writes, employment is not a simple term denoting mere holding of a job for which a wage is paid, or operating of one's own business. Rather, it signifies who is doing what under the circumstances he most wants to do. Such a person is fully employed. Let us now look at how employment is categorized by two important agencies in India. National Sample Survey Organization, NSSO, categorize employment in three types. Times self-employed. Times employed on regular wage. Times employed on casual wage. Census of India categorized employment of workers in the following manner. Times main workers. Times marginal workers. Times cultivators. Times other workers. Box. No. 1. Work is defined as participation, which can be physical or mental in nature, in any economically productive activity, with or without receiving any kind of compensation wage in cash or kind. MWG-011 PG.12. NSSO defined work as gainful activity that is pursued for pay, profit or family gain. It is an activity which results in the production of goods and services for exchange. MWG-011 PG. 148. Occupation is a person's usual or principal work, especially as a means of earning a living. It can be a paid or unpaid activity. It can include business, profession, employment, or a vocation. MWG-011 PG. 205. Labor is primary factor of production. The size of a nation's labor force is determined by the size of its adult population and the extent to which the adults are either working or are prepared to offer their labor for wages. Labor force participation rate is the number of population that supplies their labor services. Let us now read about the historical account of employment generation in India followed by impact of gender on employment of men and women. 9.4 Gender and Employment, Historical Overview. The first phase of policy reform started in 1980s, drifting from Nehruvian socialist policy and paving way for further reforms in 1990. Later, the Structural Adjustment Program, SAP, adopted by the Government of India in 1991 to 1992 paved way for trade liberalization and investment from multinational and transnational corporations. This had a significant impact on the growth of the secondary, manufacturing like garments, sports goods, etc., and territory, services like IT and IETs, etc., sectors. But there was a decline in the growth of the primary sector, like agriculture, fisheries, and allied activities. This has led migration of people from rural to urban areas in search of employment. Thus, trade liberalization, economic growth, and low productivity in primary sector brought about shift in employment pattern. The semi, low and unskilled migrant population joined in informal sector. The migration of men from rural to urban areas burdened the rural women. Due to this, agriculture became feminized as women had to take up agricultural activities in absence of men. At the same time, when women migrated to urban areas, they too had to find employment within the informal sector. Certain occupation became more feminized, like petty vending, as men joined in particular semi-skilled occupations like masonry, plumbing and carpentry. Thus, employment became more gender segregated. 9.5 Gender division of labor. Gender division of labor occurs because human society marks certain roles for men and women. Gender roles exist because communities and societies have created different social norms of behavior, values, and attitudes for men and women. Gender roles assigned to men and women bring certain perception associated with them. For example, although childbearing is a biological function of female sex, but both men and women can rear children. Our society has assigned care responsibilities to women. The same notion is carried to the realm of labor market where employments related to caregiving, nurturing and service providing are highly represented by women workers. Let us read about it in detail in the following section. 9.6 Gender segregated labor market. Gender segregation is the process by which women and men end up in different types of occupation, so that two different types of labor markets may be said to exist, one for women with limited opportunities of growth, and the other with better job prospects for men. This segregation has evolved from the concept of gender marking, which takes place by a process in which the qualifications and characteristics of an occupation become associated with gender. Gender marking becomes apparent when occupations become associated female or male workers. Thus, gender segregation may be seen as a result of gender marking of qualifications, characteristics, occupations, and work functions. Gender segregation is highly complex and is reflected at all levels: horizontal, vertical, and internal. 9th June 2001 Internal gender segregation. Internal gender segregation is when women and men are employed in the same occupation but carry out different level of work functions. For example, in school teaching primary classes, classes 1st to 5th, are preferred to be taught by female teachers, while secondary classes, classes 9th to 12th, are taught by male teachers too. 9th June 2002 Horizontal gender segregation. Horizontal segregation is when women work in certain occupations and industries and men in others. For example, a large number of women work in services, especially the personal and caring services, while women's participation in the industrial sector, like heavy machine industries, is generally much lower than that of men. This also matches with the gender roles assigned to men and women by society. 9th June 2003 Vertical gender segregation. Vertical segregation, within the same occupation, men tend to occupy the higher managerial positions and women comparatively lower positions. This hierarchical division is referred to as vertical segregation. Even where an occupation is to some extent mixed, women are usually in the less responsible, less secure, and less well-paid jobs. On the other hand, even in occupation numerically dominated by women, Men are still often found in the management positions, for example, the manager of a primary school. Box No. 2. Worldwide, the proportion of women in managerial and decision-making positions is low, the rule being the higher you go up, the fewer the women. Women make up less than 5% of the world's heads of state, heads of major corporations, and top executives in international organizations. Of the top 1,000 corporations in the United States, 2 are headed by women. Women represent, on average, under 10% of members of parliament and 20% of mid-level managers. This trend is pretty much the same today. Susan Bullock, 1994. Case Study 1. This case study gives you an example for the following issues. 1. Gender roles played by women in productive activities. 2. Non-acknowledgement of women's contribution to the productive work. 3. Wage rate paid to the women in agriculture is less than men. 4. Women's triple burden. Let us see an example. A household has 4 members, Vellayamal, her husband Karupaya, and their 2 sons. Karupaya was an agricultural wage worker. He is now unable to work due to illness. Their family needs to afford medical treatment to him. The earnings of the household come from wages from work at agricultural and non-agricultural tasks earned by Vellayamal and her elder son. Although wage rates for women are lower than wage rates paid to men, Vellayamal works more days a year than her son. Her total earnings in the year are higher than her son's. She works at home and at wage labor from very early morning until after the night meal. Household decisions like taking loan, educational decision of younger son, and moving out of village for 2 weeks along with others for harvesting groundnut are jointly taken by Vellayamal and Karupaya, though Karupaya's views are crucial and generally accepted by Vellayamal. He considers as head of household. If the head of household were to be identified on the basis of the role played by men and women, Vellayamal would be identified as the head of household in this situation. But villagers in her village identify Karupaya as a head of household unhesitatingly. This recognition of Karupaya as head of household is an important aspect of social reality and of the subordinate status of women. The case study just discussed has been adopted from Ramachandran et al. 2001 quoted in Madhura Swaminathan. 2013, India, a short note with a focus on the rural economy. Bangalore, Indian Statistical Institute. Before reading the next section, answer the following questions based on your understanding of the section read till now. Check your progress exercise. 1. What are the employment categories according to NSSO? 2. Define work. 3. What is gender marking? 4. What is labor? Workers can be categorized into 2 broad categories based on their participation in informal or formal economy of a country. One is unorganized or informal sector, and the other is organized or formal sector. Let us now read about the situation of employment of women in informal sector. 9.7 Employment in informal sectors. Informal sector is also called as unorganized sector in India. The existing estimation shows that the growth of informal economy to the total non-agricultural employment is about 65% in Asia, ILO 2002. India includes agriculture in informal employment. Globalization further expanded the informal sector in the developing and transition countries. Globalization contributes for the movement of capital across national boundaries in search of cheap labor. Wherever cheap labor is available, the transnational and multinational companies establish their production centers units. Informalization of economy provides cheap labor and small-scale support services by producing goods in piece rate and offering contractual services to multinational and transnational corporations, Umarani and Jimor Uni 2009. Activities of informal sector can be broadly categorized into 1. Informal self-owned enterprises and 2. Casual workers. Home-based workers and street vendors comprise largest subgroups in the informal workforce. Between the two, visibility of street vendors is more prominent. They comprise 10 to 25% of the non-agricultural workforce in developing courtiers, ILO, 2002. Self-employed run small units in a particular place doing vending business. The workforce distribution in the informal sector differs from country to country. The casual workers do not have a permanent job and they get wages on daily basis. So, they tend to shuttle from one work to the other depending upon the availability of work and the wage rate on a particular day. Women form an important part of the informal economy in almost all countries, both in terms of the number of women engaged and in terms of their contribution to the output of the informal economy. Given the nature of activities, home-based, street vending, and other self-employment ventures, women's contribution in informal sector may get underestimated. In India, women comprise about one-third of the working force. The number of women workers employed in the unorganized sector is higher in rural areas than in urban areas. A majority of the women in rural areas work in the agriculture sector. In urban areas, women are engaged in a variety of occupations like petty trades such as vegetables sellers, flower sellers, ironing, construction workers, domestic maids, etc. Since most of the activities in the unorganized sector, informal sector generally require less skill and education and are of a traditional nature, a significant proportion of women workers in India are in this sector. In urban areas, over 80% women are working in the unorganized informal economy where earnings are extremely low, hours of work long, no paid leave, no medical insurance or pension or any other social security benefits. Working in the informal economy often becomes hazardous for undernourished women workers, especially for children and adolescents. Women contribute significantly to national economic growth as also to family welfare through working as home-based workers in household industries, domestic workers, petty trades, services, construction sector, etc. Yet, their contribution is not adequately recognized. Their gender-specific problems are not adequately addressed. They remain largely unorganized, unheard, underpaid, and underrepresented. The following section discusses women employment in organized formal sector. This section is adopted from the Unit 1, Block 2, MWG-011 PG. 103 to 107. 9.8 Employment in organized sector. With greater opening up of higher education facilities and training opportunities for women in the post-independence period, women have become better equipped to enter formal organized sector of employment. From past couple of decades, middle class, urban educated women have taken up work in a significant manner. Constitutional provision of non-discrimination, expansion of employment opportunities in secondary and tertiary sector, greater opportunities to obtain skill-based education, and growing pressure on urban middle-class families to enhance her family income are some of the prominent factors that has led to participation of women in organized sectors in high parentages. Teaching has always been a favored profession for women because it is one of the most compatible professions with women's traditional roles in society. Also, shorter work hours and vacations along with their own children also work in favor of women's domestic responsibilities. Post-liberalization period, increasing number of women is found in tertiary sector, service sector, in the professions like information technology and information technology-enabled services, ITES. A major proportion of women labor force is employed in the allied activities of agriculture followed by service and manufacturing industries. Manufacturing has also been another major source of employment for women. Industries like fertilizers and pesticides, manufacturing paints, chemical products, dyeing, bleaching of cotton textiles, electric and electronic equipments, garment manufacturing have higher concentration of women workers. The number of women employees in professional and technical categories has also been increasing both in public and private sectors. In public sector, we find better representation of women employees, especially at the entry level, as the selection is based on merit in competitive exams. While in private sector, women have shown steady rise in percentages in clerical and related fields, school teaching, ITES and IT. Women employees at managerial level are seen only in few of new field of employment like advertising, market research, operation research, hotel management, etc. Looking at the composition of women workers in organized sector, it appears that close to 3/4 of these women are in jobs requiring good educational qualifications. This is found to be an urban phenomenon leading to the conclusion that rural women are largely excluded from jobs in organized sector as they predominantly belong to educationally deprived category. Table 9.1 Women earn far less than men. Let us read about the contemporary situation of women's employment in India. 9.9 Situation at present. Working women in India are on a rise and women are able to forge ahead overcoming socio-cultural barriers. India has the second largest workforce in the world, but since the last decade participation of women force is declining. Let's us look at some of the major challenges faced by women in India that have an impact on their employment also. 9 September 2001 Education. Women of certain classes and social groups have not been able to gain knowledge and skills due to lack of educational opportunities. They lack personal development. They are not able to get the work of their choice. Education is offered through various medium. Formal education is given through schools. The definition for learning different ways is given below. Formal learning takes place in education and training institutions, leading to recognized diplomas and qualifications. Non-formal learning takes place alongside the mainstream system of education and training and does not typically lead to formalized certificates. Non-formal learning may be provided in the workplace and through the activities of civil society organizations and groups, such as youth organizations, trade unions, and political parties. It can also be provided through organizations and services which have been set up to complement formal systems, such as arts, music, and sports classes or private tutoring to prepare for examinations. Informal learning is a natural accompaniment to everyday life. Unlike formal and non-formal learning, informal learning is not necessarily the intentional learning, and so even the individuals may not recognize it as a substantial contributor to their knowledge and skills. After realizing the significance of women's education and their contribution to the economic activities, Government of India has come up with various schemes and programs to draw in girls and women to pursue education at all levels, namely school, college, and technical education. Surveys at national level have shown direct relationship between women's education and reduction of maternal, child, and infant mortality. Also, educated women contribute significantly more towards the economy of a country. 9 September 2002 Falling rates of employment. According to Census 2011, although women constitute 48% of the population, but their participation in labor market is half of that of men. Thus, 23 million women are missing from the workforce. Conventional reasons for this are cultural and traditional expectations from women to remain homebound. The International Labour Organization added to other factors that make women opt out of employment, namely, employment in non-traditional sectors and challenges to re-enter labour market after a break for childbearing. NSSO 66th round projects that women remain in education system for a longer time now, thereby making them unavailable for employment. 9 September 2003 Servicization. Opening up of the economy in 1990s has led to providing new opportunities of employment to both men and women. This opening up proved to be more advantageous to educated or skilled section of men and women. But women constitute a large percentage of poor, unskilled and uneducated population of India who also suffers from social, economic and sexual exploitation on joining workforce. Thus, the whole lot of women especially from rural background taking up performs domestic work in urban centers. Earlier, middle-class women are taking care of household chores and childcare. With this section joined workforce, these responsibilities, domestic work like cleaning, washing and cooking, looking after infant and preschool children, have been shifted to another set of women who work as maids for full-time or as part-time domestic help. The whole process has put both the section of women under stress as educated middle-class women face the issues of work-life balance and the unskilled, uneducated women work under unregulated work norms. Both the section of women are subjected to medical and health problems. Please take short break and try to find answers to the following questions based on your reading of the previous section of the unit. Check your progress exercise. 1. Explain women's role in informal sector in India. 2. What is servicization? What are the activities women perform in service sectors? 3. Differentiate formal and non-formal learning. 9.10 Summing UP. Although the cultural restrictions that women faced in Indian society are giving way to new understanding that women needs to be given equal opportunities in life, but still women are not as free as men to participate in labor market mainly because of persistence of gender division of labor. Related to gender roles is women's association with most of the unpaid work that further restricts them to take up paid work. In this unit we have seen definition of employment and how employment became gendered. We have also traced the historical overview of gender and employment. Along with employment, we have seen labor market and its segmentation based on gender. Other important aspects we have discussed in this unit are gender issues in formal and informal sectors. Finally, we came up with present scenario in employment sector in this unit. Not only we discussed present scenario, we also traced the importance of women's education to improve the situation of women in the employment and labor market. In the era of globalization, the growth of service sector tertiary is notable. The service sectors like IT and ITS are also discussed with gender perspective. 9.11 Keywords. National Sample Survey Organization, NSSO, it is Government of India organization. It comes under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. It conducts socio-economic survey in India. Census of India, it is Government of India organization under Ministry of Home Affairs. It collects variety of statistical information on different characteristics of the people of India once in 10 years. It has 130 years history. The collected information is useful for the scholars in the field of social sciences to study India. The organization headed by the Registrar General and Census Commissioner of India. The Census Act was enacted in 1948 to provide for the scheme of conducting population census with duties and responsibilities of census officers. Information technology enabled services ITES, it is also called Web-Enabled Services or Remote Services or Teleworking. It is helpful to improve the efficiency of the organization by using information technology. The following are the few key ITES: call centers, electronic publishing, medical transcription, data centers, GIS mapping, and portals. 9.13 Unit N questions. 1. Explain historical overview of gender and employment. 2. What are horizontal, vertical, and internal gender segregations? 3. Explain employment scenario in informal and formal sectors in India. 4. Explain current employment scenario in India.